I've always had this obsession with why people actually buy one brand over another, and why some brands were very successful and some brands weren't.
Welcome to our new podcast where we're interviewing interesting people from around the business world to hear their stories, explore their business philosophies, and maybe learn a thing or two. Today, we're delighted to have Phil Harding from BBB Drinks. Phil, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your business?
My name's Phil, owner of BBB Drinks. We've been going for 13 years. It seems a bit longer than that in some days. So what we do is we import and distribute high-end spirits brands from around the world. So we import from Australia, South Africa, all across Europe, from Ukraine to Ireland, the Americas. So got quite a lot of US clients. We've even picked up one from Costa Rica recently, and Bolivia in South America. So from all around the world, we import under bond into our warehouse in the Midlands, and then we distribute into all sales channels. So what does that mean? We sell into wholesalers who then sell onto the on-trade, so bars, restaurants, clubs, etc. around the country. Then we sell direct into kind of bricks and mortar retail, so the likes of Harvey Nichols, Fortnum & Mason, John Lewis, Phoenix, those kind of establishments. And then obviously in the UK, we're in a lucky position because we can sell online. And we've got lots of partners who sell booze online. And then the thing which we do, which is fairly unique for businesses such as ours, we manage all of our brands on Amazon. So Amazon being the single biggest online retailer for alcohol in the UK. We can we manage all of our brands on Amazon. So that's a big part of our business. Something that's just, I say, is unique, and in a way the UK is well ahead of a lot of other markets. So a lot of markets which Amazon does operate in, you can't sell alcohol online. So that's a big point of difference for us. But we mainly operate in the kind of high end end of the on trade, so bars and restaurants, and high end off trade.
It's a very, very interesting business. How did you get into it? So, like, where did it all start?
I've always worked all of my professional life in kind of food and drinks. I used to run restaurants and bars, even nightclubs, for about 15 years, mainly in kind of West Central London. And that was great. I just loved the hospitality industry, loved everything about food and drink, but always wanted to have my own business. And I suppose I was always wondering whether I should actually open my own bar, own restaurant. And you need an awful lot of money to start that up. It's very high risk, and I just always felt that if I brought on a partner who could support me money wise, that I'd end up doing all the work and not having much equity. So I thought, well, I can help other people start up their restaurants and bars, which I did do. I even helped with Inception Group with some of their first sites. But then I've always had this obsession with why people actually buy one brand over another, and why some brands were very successful and some brands weren't. I was very lucky to have the opportunity to got the offer from SAB Miller, which used to be SAB Miller, now part of InBev, to launch one of their brands into the UK market as a consultant. And I kind of got seen from the inside how a big corporate actually goes about launching a brand, which actually showed me that a lot of big corporates often don't have the wherewithal to actually launch new brands. They're very good at maintaining market share with big brands, but not actually new brands. So that kind of gave me this belief that, okay, I know that small independent brands don't know how to launch into the UK because of lack of knowledge, either from outside the UK or whether they might be new to the industry within the UK. But then looking at the big multi-billion pound corporate companies, they seem to have got knowledge gaps as well with how to launch smaller brands into the market. And there's a big thing within corporates between the sales team and the marketing team, not communicating, marketing team having a very clear vision about where a brand should be, and the sales team not really interested in that vision. So I could see immediately there was a kind of gap there for a company who could help brands come into the UK market and to kind of get them into the right route to market, talk to the end consumer in the right way, train people as to why a beer or a drink should be drunk in a certain way, what the serve was, what the glass was, etc., etc. So that was the kind of my first kind of thought of why I should start a company. And I went out there and just really winged it from day one. I wasn't a trained salesperson. I knew the industry, but I only knew a bit of the industry. I knew how to run bars and pubs and restaurants. I didn't actually know the chain of how you actually got a product to there. So the wholesale side of things, I was not really all that sure about. But unless you go into both feet first, you just don't learn. So I had to learn pretty quickly on the job how actually things were imported, the wholesale network, etc., etc. But so that was a great learning curve. But I've never lost that fascination of why some brands are more successful than others and what makes a good brand. And I think that still keeps me powering on with what we do, which is to help new brands get into the UK market, getting it into the right channels, talking about the brand in the right way, etc., etc. So that's just fascinates me still. And every brand is different, and there are always new brands coming to market. So 13 years old, we've launched over 80 new brands into the UK markets.
Wow, that's quite an achievement. So along the way, normally they say you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes. Tell us about some of your failures and what you learned from them.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I'd say that in business, what doesn't sink you makes you stronger. I really believe that you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. And I know these are all very kind of glib things to say, but I genuinely believe that's true. So there are lots of mistakes which I've made. There are lots of brands which we've taken on, which we probably shouldn't have taken on. But I think, every day is a school day, and we're still learning. But I would say that when you're anxious to grow the business and get new brands on, that you often kind of grab brands which maybe you shouldn't have. You didn't do your homework on properly, and didn't actually properly sit down and think, is this right for us, or have they done their homework with the actual with their own brand, and I think without banging the drum too much, the whole marketing aspect of a brand is often overlooked by the brand owner. They're so anxious about whether it tastes right, whether it's in a pretty bottle, that they forget about a lot of the other things. So we've been guilty in the past of being swept up with the enthusiasm of the brand owner and not actually thought, hang on, how have they actually thought about their marketing story? And I think that's one thing which I'm very, very kind of insistent on these days. It's like, what's the marketing story? How are we going to communicate that into the market, rather than being swept up with a rather over enthusiastic brand owner who can be very persuasive, for sure. I think the other thing as well is really, really, really understand your numbers. And for a big chunk of our existence as a business, we kind of siloed things. Myself and previous business partner, he looked after all the finance, and I looked after bringing in new business. And I think that we were far too siloed with what we were doing and weren't communicating properly. And once I brought everything under my direct eye, knowing exactly what was happening with the numbers up to the moment, that you have much more confidence with the decisions which you can make, and you know exactly what's going on within your business, and then you can probably start delegating with systems. So that would be the kind of very boring thing about the cash flow, and making sure that you know exactly everything's joined up, and that you're planning ahead properly, and that you're planning for the worst with when it comes to cash. And I think then the other thing is, and you know, something which took a long time for us to refine and to get to where we are at the moment, is to make sure that you need to have a product which can be replicated regularly, and you know, you make sure you've got your sales funnel onboarding, and then once it's in, that you can actually replicate that without having to rethink your business all the time. I think to simplify things and to kind of have that real clear step-by-step process, which eventually hopefully you can then start to take steps back, delegate. That's the key to actually having a successful business, and to have a business which can scale. And that was always a problem with us for the first many years, that we were trying to offer almost too much to clients, and overcomplicating things. And a big mistake from us, that we kind of think we just got to offer more and more and more, when actually you sometimes have to pare things back. And I think that now, over the last couple of years, we've kind of got that balance right. We've got two main different ways of working with brands. One is a slightly more complicated way, but then we've got a very simple way, and it's simple for people to understand. Once people understand a simple model, you kind of got that confidence. If people don't understand, they tend to shy away.
That I think that's quite often the case with service-based businesses, is you're trying to be all things to all people, and try to be too bespoke, and in the end you get into a muddle where you don't know how to talk about your business in a way that the consumer or your client understands what it is that you're actually offering them.
Absolutely.
That is something that, you know, we come across. Well, first of all, something we struggled with as well, because video is one of those things where, you know, people ask you, what do you do? Video. Okay, well, that can be, you know, anything from, you know, UGC reels to, you know, big brand films with helicopter crashes and car chases. So, you know, knowing how to talk about your service, but having a, like you say, a system, a product, a standard in place, I think that really helps. So it's very interesting to, you know, to hear about other people's struggles that, you know, seems to be in the same vein. So now that you've got those processes in place, you know, you seem to be on sort of a good footing for growth. What do you think the future holds for BBB Drinks?
I think it's really exciting. I think you know, we're just constantly trying to tweak those bits to make ourselves more efficient. So that we're still working through that. And I think that once we really refine our system perfectly, we've got the capacity in reporting, then we can really push the envelope a lot more with how many clients we can bring on. And my aim is, my kind of mission is really to lower the barriers of entry for the UK market for brands from abroad or new startup brands. So I want to be saying yes to as many brands as possible, rather than that, don't know, you know. So how far we can grow the business, I think it just comes down to how good our systems will be over time. You know, how much we can add, still having that human touch with clients, but how many new brands we can add to our what we call our market access side of things. So I think, yeah, there's a huge amount more capacity left in the system, but obviously everything's finite. I'd like to see us grow maybe 10 times over the next few years in revenue. But then that's just the UK. We've got a French business which is up and running. We're just starting to onboard our first clients there. I want to do the same thing in France, which is obviously a huge alcohol market as well. But then we've got plans to move into Germany, Italy, Spain, which would be most of the other main European markets which have got flexibility or ease of entry, as opposed to Sweden, Finland, Norway, which have got monopolies, state monopolies, which are harder to get into. So I think those are the markets which we want to cover off. And who knows, we might look at African markets or South American markets. But I think once we understand our business model, once we go into other big foreign markets, then I think there's that kind of scalability within that. Because I'd like to be able to offer brands from the USA. How do you get into the whole of Europe, not just the UK, as a kind of much easier solution? So you should come in with us, and we can sort out a huge number of your main areas of actually growing an alcohol brand.
So one of the big challenges when you are a growing business like you are is maintaining that customer relationship, because as you grow, there's lots more things that are vying for your attention. How do you manage that? How do you remain easy to do business with whilst you're going through this kind of growth? What's your philosophy on that?
I think it's by taking baby steps. I think if you try and reinvent the wheel or to make a huge leap of change, then you're going to lose sight and the bucket with holes in the bottom of it. You're just going to be putting in more at the top, and you're going to be losing some of your core business out the bottom. So I think you've got to keep laser focused on still having that kind of personal touch with your clients, and at the same time incrementally making changes. And that's what we've been doing for the last couple of years, especially. Just every month we've got to make a change to make things better, and to add capacity to our business should mean actual better service to your customer. So because the customer retention should be better, so better reporting, more up-to-date reporting. So a lot of our time is actually spent on going backwards and forwards with clients about how much stock they've got in the warehouse, how much stock has been sent into Amazon, which accounts have been serviced, this, that, and the other, how much marketing fund they've got left. If they can go on and see on a live dashboard, which we've developed, all of that information without having to send us an email, it gives them much more confidence in what's going on. So they're not left in the dark thinking, oh, I've got to pick up the phone or send them an email. That it's just much better customer care. So, and if they do want to talk to us, then it's about something maybe more important, where we can bring a lot more value rather than just talking about how many bottles they've got in the warehouse. So I think for us it's about bringing in automation and capacity into those areas around reporting, around onboarding, about reconciliation, invoicing, and stuff like that. All the kind of pretty boring stuff, where we can hopefully give more time to customers who need it when it comes to potentially strategy, about a campaign which they might want to put on Amazon, or what they're going to do once they get into John Lewis, that kind of stuff. So actually spending time on the important stuff rather than the mundane stuff. Not that the mundane stuff isn't important, it's just it's time consuming. So yeah, I think with business, if we had a huge budget, etc., we might be going, oh wow, we'll get this huge new system in, and let's change things from A to Z. But actually, we're constrained by being still quite a small business, and we've just got to do things incrementally, and there's not a huge shift overnight into some all singing, all dancing system. It's just like, let's change this, test it, does this work? Okay, yeah, let's go on, move on to the next thing.
Yeah, often, being smaller means you need to be a lot more creative, and you come up with new ways of doing things, creative ways that end up being better in the end, doesn't it?
I would say so. And I think that something which maybe not so much internally to us, but definitely when you see brands who have got a lot of money to throw at things, sometimes they just waste a lot of money on stuff. You go, well, how's that related to actually growing your brand? Because you've got a very small marketing budget, you've got to be focused on what actually every pound is going to get you out the other end. And I think that's a great discipline to have, because it really focuses you. And it does definitely, as you say, it makes you come up with much more creative ways, and it keeps everybody on point. I think that, for instance, PR is a great thing to have, but actually if you're not giving the PR team a correct focus with correct KPIs, and a defined time frame for what they're doing that project in, you can just be throwing good money after bad. And that's not me dissing PR. That's just fact. That you've got to focus everybody within the whole team as to what they're actually doing. And often I've got brands who come and say, "Oh yeah, no, we're just about to sponsor F1 or the Cows Week or something like that." You're like, oh yeah, that's great. You've spent however many tens of thousands of pounds on that, but are you going to win more drinkers to drink your drink?
Yeah.
What's the connection between that particular sporting event, whatever, and what the overall branding message of the brand? And it's just, they're like, oh well, seems like a good thing to do, and it'll be good jolly afterwards. But no, if let's put that money to doing some amazing bar takeovers, or getting some POS, which actually might reinforce when and how that drink should be drunk, rather than just having a kind of a flashy car attached to the brand, which actually has got no particular cut through with the demographic which you're wanting to engage with.
No, I agree. My experience is that marketing teams can sometimes be like cargo cults. The cargo cults from the Pacific, where these sort of Pacific Islanders, I think they were, like they didn't understand the technology, so they thought if they just do what these people did, then the planes with the cargo will come. So they're just replicating that. They sit there with, coconuts and speaking into a stick, calling the planes, which never come, because they saw the, other folks doing it. And marketing can be the same. We often get people asking, they want to make a brand film. It's like, okay, but what do you want out the back of that? Because unless you're Coca-Cola or Nike or whoever, brand awareness isn't your problem. And you drill down, in the end, it comes down to sales. Okay, if I know you want sales, we know what video to make you, because a brand film's going to sit on your website, 100 people's going to see it, and you're not going to get any new sales out of it, and you're just going to be disappointed. So I think it's sort of the same principle, isn't it?
And I think in general, as I mentioned before, that especially for small brands, people get very obsessed with the liquid. They get very obsessed with having a pretty bottle. They might think that they've got some sort of marketing thing, but it's often an afterthought rather than actually the first thing. That before they've even gone and developed the liquid, that they've actually thought about who their target consumer is, and then all the touch points on the brand, whether that be social media, would be website, there'd be the flyers which they're putting out, or the way the salespeople talk about the brand. That everything has got to be thought through, and that's very, very, very little thought often goes into that. And I love it when people come to me and they go, well, we're a kind of marketing led brand, because then you know that you don't need to think so much about what your next move is, because that you've already thought about that. You've already developed a plan, a framework by which you go, it's coming into summer. We know that we want to do X, Y, and Z, and we want to engage with, I don't know, music festival, and this is the way we're going to activate it. And it just, you don't need to be umming and ahhing about whether you should be doing something, because you know what you're wanting to do already. And it goes back to that clarity, doesn't it? Simple clarity is, if you're clear about your mission, then hopefully that's projected through your touch points onto the end consumer, and they're very clear about why they should be drinking your drink, and when they should be drinking it, and how they should be drinking it. Because if you haven't thought through that, the consumer's got no chance of, it's down to them to go, you know what, there's a drink in a category I've never heard of, I'm going to buy it, and then I'm going to make a drink instead of my usual G&T. It's just, you've got to think through everything. And as I say, I'm constantly amazed at how few people actually do that.
You mentioned earlier brand story. We're here at, I'm a big proponent of using narrative to drive communications. And to get your audience to understand what it is you're trying to tell them. Tell me about your philosophy on story and how that relates to a brand and how you use it.
Yeah, I think it's very important to have something which is, I don't know quite which way you mean narrative, but the way I understand narrative is that there's like continuous joined up thinking with interwoven into the brand, and the narrative should be telling the consumer in various different ways about when the drink should be drunk, how it should be drunk. And if you're not painting that picture for people, then, as I say, people get confused with why should they be trying to work out what your brand is about rather than you telling them. And I think a brand which we've worked with for a while, which I think I could see this happening. Many conversations with the brand owner, and they'd come up with a wonderful drink, absolutely amazing liquid, beautiful bottle, all worked so well with where it was from geographically, and they wanted it to encapsulate that part of the world which is very, very well known. And I said, but I think whilst you've got so many of the ingredients, literally, figuratively, together to make a good brand, I still think you're lacking that 5% of how you're communicating that almost like occasion to the consumer. So yes, this brand encapsulates the type where you're from geographically, but I still think you need to make that connection so that when someone walks into a bar in Manchester, they look at your bottle, and because of all the marketing communication that you've got, they think, well, I'm going to have one of those because it will take me back to, or give me that image of that particular part of the world. And I think if you get all of your narrative right, then people will actually understand that. And it's a bit like, I suppose, brands which have invested hundreds of millions into marketing over the years. Pims, for instance. Why do people drink Pims when the sun comes out? It's not by accident that people do that. and people understand the serve and the occasion. You're not going to have people knocking out of Pimm's at this time of the year. You're just not. Why? Because that's not the narrative of the brand. But it's so important with Pimm's that it's that sunshine in England, watching probably some sporting occasion which you're not really that particularly interested in, like polo or something like that. They've got that beautifully. They've got the occasion and they've got the weather and they've got that kind of afternoon celebratory drinking, relaxing drinking. But I think that if you had that in the south of France, you'd still, the beauty of a brand like that is you still almost taking that little bit of England, beautiful sunshiny English day, to the south of France. You're kind of taking that between. I think that that's when you've got a brand which has got that properly thought out narrative, is that you kind of got that occasion and place. When you get all that together with the brand, and people have really thought that out, and it can be that can be a ritual or a garnish or a particular bit of glassware which is involved. Or the more the better in my view, as long as you're not overcomplicating it. I think another brilliant brand who nail it absolutely perfectly is Hendrix, and it's a very simple serve in a glass, ice, but the magic thing is that slice of cucumber, which is not difficult to find any supermarket, any vegetable greengrocer. You'll be able to get it. Simple slice, and it goes, but it's memorable, and people will know how to drink it, why it's in there, because it accentuates those flavors, etc., etc. It can be done in a bar, at home, and you're elevating something slightly, and people are thinking they're having a special drink, which they are. Hendrix is a lovely drink. So, but I think it's just those kind of magic dust, gold dust bits, when you're looking at really successful brands, they kind of got those things really well thought out. If you can bring that to a startup brand, you're really onto something. But obviously, it takes time to actually get those serves through, get that message through. It takes a long time. It's not a flick of the switch thing. When you look at, I don't know, Aperol Spritz, a very, very successful serve, which has completely exploded the kind of the spritz category as a drinking occasion. Spent millions and millions and millions reinforcing that message about exactly what the garnish should be, glassware. Taking over all those outdoor spaces with the umbrellas and the tableware, etc. So that's a very, very good example of a big brand spending a lot of money just to make sure that occasion and that the way it's drunk is understood by the consumer, and they've got a brand which is absolute giant now. But
so yeah, that's very, very interesting. It's really good to hear about sort of different industries and all the different ways that people sort of talk about products and how you communicate about different kinds of products. Tell me a bit about the state of the industry at the moment. Obviously lots of businesses are struggling. Where are things with your industry, and what are the big challenges?
There are various different challenges. I suppose we'd have to start with what happened with lockdowns and the enforced change of where people drank. So the on-trade being closed down for a big chunk of time, which then made people more used to drinking at home, on one hand, and then obviously a lot of strain on the hospitality industry on the other hand, once things did open up. So I think we've seen a lot of change of how and where people are drinking. So a lot more people probably opened up bars in their back garden for their friends and neighbors, discovered that often it's a lot cheaper to buy some booze from the supermarket rather than buying it in the pub, which I find understandable but quite depressing, because pubs should be the center of communities, and we should be doing everything we can to keep pubs open. And then once the Ukraine crisis kicked off, obviously there were a lot of pressures, inflationary pressures on kind of cost of goods, which compounded obviously the inflationary pressures of what happened during COVID. And so a lot of brands have, across the board, so beer brands, spirits brands, etc., have been under a lot of pressure, and a lot have gone to the wall already. A lot of breweries, a lot of distilleries have gone to the wall. And I think you're finding a lot which are probably still in this kind of zombie stage, where they're not making a profit, they're just keeping their head above water, not really growing. So it's really, really sad to see a lot of hard work kind of going almost to waste with that. So you're seeing people's drinking habits changing, a lot more costs coming into the market. And then in their infinite wisdom, our government put more duty on spirits, and we're going to have another hike. So that's going to do two things. Well, two main things. It's going to decrease tax revenue, which the government is losing £800,000 a day in lost tax revenue because people are buying less. And then it's probably going to have some inflationary pressure as well, which of course then has a big knock-on effect with everything else. So this, in general, the last few years have been really, really, really tough for the industry. So from the kind of producer point of view, as well as the front end, with hospitality, particularly for the smaller companies who have got less of a cushion to actually handle cost increases. But our industry is resilient to a certain degree, and I think that there are still lots of brands wanting to launch, come through. I see a lot of this happening. So people's appetite to actually start businesses still seems to be quite high, which is good to see. So the future is not as clear as you'd want it to be. I still think that next year is going to be very challenging with what's happened with the budget, extra duty, as I mentioned, then a whole lot more costs, especially for the small guys at both ends of the market. And then on top of this, as I say, you've got this change of drinking habits often, which has put extra pressure on the hospitality industry. And I do think that people are drinking less. The younger demographic are saying that they're not drinking, but I just, the kind of 18 to 25-year-old bracket, I think that they just might be drinking in a different occasions. So I think they're probably less late night drinking. Well, that's definitely the case. A lot less clubbing, but still going to music festivals, etc. So different occasions when they're drinking. So maybe less week to week drinking, but still drinking when they're going out to big music concerts, festivals, etc. What people are drinking changes all the time. What we see is probably people drinking, still wanting flavoursome drinks, but maybe less alcohol. So, less of the kind of 40% and above ABV, but more of the liqueur type ABV. So, kind of 25% and below, which I think is a really exciting part of the alcohol industry. Vermouths, liqueurs, I think, got loads of flavor, loads of personality. You could do lots of different types of drinks with them, but and so you can have quite exciting flavors, but you're not actually drinking as much alcohol. so you can maybe drink more volume over an evening. So overall, I'm always an optimist. People have just got to adapt. I'm very concerned about what's going to happen with these independents and pubs over the next year, with increases in NI, increases in minimum wage, and all the different inflationary things which will creep back in post-budget. And I think that's probably deliberate to try and shift people away from drinking in pubs. I don't think the government is particularly fond. This particular government is particularly fond of pubs, and I find that a bit of a shame. But I think that it will only benefit the bigger pubcos, bigger chains, because, as I say, they've got more capital to play with. And I was reading on LinkedIn the other day, I think it was the head of Young's saying the budget was going to cost them about £20 million over the next year, which is quite a lot off their bottom line, but it's not going to sink them. They just need to look at saving in other areas, tweaking prices upwards. You put those same metrics into a small into a pub, standalone restaurant, it's toast for these people. It makes me very sad to think of how many businesses are going to be pushed to the wall because of this. But I'm hoping that there's some sense comes through, and that there won't be so many pressures on the industry. But we do seem to have been a whipping boy for the last few years through COVID, and then everybody said, "Oh, well, you got lots of support during COVID," but there's a decision to shut the hospitality industry down, there wasn't much evidence to support shutting it down.
This has been such an amazing conversation. I've learned so much about your business and your industry. It's really, really interesting. So to wrap it up, if you were to give someone who wants to follow in your footsteps one bit of advice, what would that be?
One bit.
10 bits.
You've got to have faith in yourself and faith in your product. And I think it's very difficult to know when to keep going and potentially when to give up. My business, whilst we've made a profit pretty much every year, it hasn't been a massive profit. And you often have the questions, well, why are you keeping on going? You could give it up, earn a lot more working for Diageo or whatever. I've heard it all. And, I think you've got to really understand that most successful businesses probably don't make a lot of money for the first 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and you just got to keep on going. And some businesses almost go to the wall, and as what we were talking about before, what doesn't make you, doesn't sink you, probably makes you stronger, that you understand what mistakes you have made, and you adapt. As Churchill would say, keep on buggering on. And I think that you've got to have tenacity in business. And it sounds boring, but I think that the reason that we've kept going for 13 years is because I just don't give up. And you incrementally try and make your business better and better. And then all of a sudden you're going, oh, wow, things are starting to move in the right direction. Then you go, oh, wow, just growth like for like. And that's what I think where we are. Hopefully Touchwood will still be doing the same thing in a year's time. But all of a sudden you go, wow, we're actually making really big steps ahead when it comes to that growth trajectory. And I think a lot of businesses are that hockey stick thing where you're very slowly growing. Probably the growth is a bit up and down, but then you get to the point where you've built a lot of different things. You've built all your relationships, you've built your case studies, your business inside out, you've perfected your offer, or you've got an offer which really resonates, at last, and all the stars start aligning, and then you see your uptick, and you see that kind of real growth. But definitely business is not for people who've got no patience. You've got to have patience, and you've got to have plan. You've got to plan. You've got to have patience. You've got to be able to adapt. You've got to be able to have sleepless nights, as you and I both know. But one thing I'd always say to people is, if you've got an idea, even if you think it might be a bit of a crazy idea, but you've got an idea for a business, just go and do it. If you fail, there's nothing wrong with failing. There's nothing wrong with failing at all. Everybody will fail at some point in their life. It just depends on what kind of, whether you go out of business and you go, you know what, I got started my system and I'm going to go back to my 9-to-5 job. Or it might be I've failed with that, but actually know now that I can do a much better business doing X, Y, or Z. Just go and do it. It could be the most rewarding and amazing thing you could do. But to have that regret when you're much older in life and you can't do it anymore, I think it would be a pretty crap thing to be thinking.
Absolutely. Phil, thank you so much. Tell me one last thing. If someone wants to get hold of you, what's the best way?
LinkedIn, so Philip Harding, or on our website, bbbdrinks.com.
Phil, thank you so much and have a great evening.